Okay, guys, seeing as the recording didn't take the first time, I'm going to record this entire section again separately very quickly so that for those of you who have a bad connection, didn't get it, yeah, that's what we're going to do. All right, let's move the camera around. All right, okay, so let's recap what happened today. Basically, we're going to learn how to use Photoshop RAW files and how to manipulate them, and what are the advantages of Photoshop RAW versus JPEGs. Okay, so if you're going to use Photoshop, we're going to file, open. We're going to look for the folder that we have our RAW files. In this case, it's called for exercises. And inside here, you can see you've got your DNG files, you've got your CR2 files, you've got your JPEGs, and a whole lot of other stuff. The software that I gave you, which is Camera Raw Converter, will convert your CR2 files into DNG files. Okay, DNG files are standard Photoshop RAW formats, which will be universally accepted by all versions of Photoshop. But if you want to use CR2, and if you double click on the CR2 RAW file, some versions of Photoshop can open the file and use it as well. If your Photoshop cannot do that, then you will need to download and install the Adobe RAW plugin, which I sent a link to earlier as well. Let's get started. I'm going to start by using the DNG files, and as you can see, we've got a few versions of the DNG. I am only going to take the two extremes, and I'm going to show you how RAW format is going to save you. Okay, I'm going to take f1.8 DNG, and there it is. Okay, now I shot this at 1.8, f-stop 1.8, because I wanted it to be slightly brighter than the rest. The standard image that I really like personally is the 2.8, which is slightly darker. But I'm going to use this and I'm going to bring the highlights down. So if you look on the right hand side over here, you can actually slide the exposure bar down and everything will reduce in brightness. Okay, now just for your information, again, this portion of the control panel is for the brightness or the luminance values. The bottom part here is for the color values. All right, see, I'm going to increase saturation. It's getting really bright. It's getting really dark. Okay, sorry, not dark, but saturated. All right, click on default to bring it back to the original. I'm going to increase my exposure. I am going to bring my highlights down. I'm going to play with the exposure. I'm going to push up my shadows, blah, blah, blah. You can play with all of these things at will to get the shot that you want. But let me explain what they do. The exposure bar here is like your exposure or your aperture of your camera. If you shot something that is too dark, you can push up the exposure and it will brighten up the image. Okay, you can't do this very well with JPEG. Okay, as you brighten it with a JPEG file, the image will disintegrate, it will break. But a RAW format or a RAW file, when you do this, the image stays pretty much the same, and that is the power of RAW format. Contrast is the difference between the bright areas and the dark areas. So if I increase contrast, it makes the dark very dark and the bright bright. I do not like touching contrast. Contrast is the last thing I touch, to be honest. I normally just bring the exposure down, and then I will play with the highlights and shadow slider. So highlights will control only the bright areas of the screen. So watch this. See, all the bright areas are being controlled. I'm going to make it darker. The shadows slider will control the dark areas of the screen, and see what happens to the bottles. See, the bottles are getting brighter. Okay, so you need to find that middle ground where you can get the most balance. All right, that means the brights are not too bright, the darks are not too dark. The most important thing to consider here is detail. You want to see texture in the dark areas and in the bright areas. And to see detail, what I like to do is turn off the saturation. Get rid of the color for now. Okay, it'll come back later, but for now, just make it black and white. And then you adjust accordingly. make sure that you get the best image that you can in terms of detail. Okay. All right. I like that. I'm happy with that. Now I'm going to bring the color back to 0. You can double click in here and type 0. This is the original color that came out of the camera. The RAW format does not, the camera does not change anything in the RAW format. It just takes the image from the sensor, sends it straight to the card. That's it. It is the best image that can come out of any camera, RAW. But RAW format doesn't mean it's nice. You need to do some touching up. You need to do some adjustment to make it vibrant, okay? And now we're gonna do vibrant. Vibrant refers to colors, okay? So we're gonna play with the color area right now. The clarity slider is like your contrast slider. It makes the colors pop. Just slide the bar up, slide the bar down, and you will see how it affects the color brilliance. It doesn't change the color so much as the brightness and contrast of the color. All right, so maybe, yeah, maybe something like that. I'm happy. I can also increase the vibrance, and the vibrance would make the color more rich. But you will notice that it does not literally touch the whites and the blacks. It just focuses on all the other colors. Personally, I don't like to touch this as well. I like to leave this at 0. I then like to play with saturation. The problem with saturation is this. It affects every single aspect of the frame. The greens in the background, the blues, everything becomes a little bit more rich, which to me is not bad, not wrong, but it's not what I want. All right. Instead, what I want to do is I want to focus purely on my product. And if my product looks good, I'm happy. Okay. All right. There's one more part here which you need to master. On the top section here, which is your white balance setting, you've got your presets. You can specify auto, daylight, cloudy, whatever you want. This is great if you made a mistake. If you shot in the wrong white balance and your photo is a different color, you can use this to fix it. Okay, for example, this is a daylight, it's slightly bluish. This is cloudy, slightly orangey, right? And this is the shade, also slightly orangey. Now, how does white balance work? It's a topic of another day because I'll need to teach you Kelvin scale and all that, which is kind of boring. Instead, what I want you to do is I want you to take your photos and start experimenting with the slider over here. And if you look at the temperature slider, if you move it to the left, your photo becomes very cold, very blue. If you move it to the right, it becomes very warm, very orangey. Now, basically, this is how cameras work, okay? When you white balance, you have a color shift from warm to cold, all right? Cold is blue, warm is orange. And the reason for that is simple. Daylight works along those spectrums as well, at least the visible part of the daylight. Early in the morning when we see it's a little bit warm because it's sunrise, the sky is a bit orangey. As it reaches around 12 o'clock in the afternoon, the sun becomes white, okay? But on the way there, the sun actually is a little bit blue, all right? We call it the sunset hour, the blue hour, and our cameras cannot cope. Our cameras cannot understand. So our job as the photographer is to adjust the colors to compensate for that, okay? So you can use the temperature to make it happen. Now I like it, I don't know, I think I like it a little bit blue, a little bit cold, all right? This is an artistic preference. You can do whatever you want to that, I don't mind, all right? Yeah, I'm adjusting the contrast a little bit because my bottle, I want my bottles to pop. I like that, that looks pretty good. Now what's amazing is considering that I shot this handheld in a room beside a window, no reflector, existing light, and you get something like that, yeah. Anybody can shoot a good photograph. There's no excuse anymore. Okay, all right, so 3 things here. First step, just to recap. White balance on top. The luminance controllers over here. Luminance is the brightness part of your photo. And the chrominance part of your photo, which is the bottom part over here, to adjust the color and the color value. Now notice what's happening here is that This is considered a primary color grade or a color correction. And the term primary refers to the very first thing that you do to a video or to a photo image. And it affects every single part of the photo. You can't specify certain areas to do. If you want to specify certain areas, you will need to learn how to do a secondary grade, okay? And that's session for another day. Okay, we can organize that if you want, all right? Master this first, and then we can move on. All right, so before we go, I want you to look at the top here. The top here is a histogram. That's a graphical representation of the brightness values in your photograph. If a lot of your image is weighed on the right-hand side of the frame, that means your image has a lot of highlights. It's highlight heavy. That's not wrong. It's just telling you that it's highlight heavy. What if I move my exposure bar all the way to the left? Now, the entire thing is moved all the way to the left as well. If you don't show me the photo, and if I look at that histogram, I'll tell you straight away, that's underexposed, my friend. That is way too dark. I will automatically bring it up to something like that, midway in the gray area. That to me would be a decent size starting point, okay? Yeah, I like it a little bit like that. Something like that. Drop the contrast a bit, and boom. Cool. Cool. Now, this is, I'm using a standard computer monitor to do this. By right, you should be using calibrated monitors, monitors which have been set to emulate the human eye or the camera that you shot, all right? And it requires some money. You need to buy some calibrating equipment, some devices. You need to calibrate. Your monitor has to be of a certain standard, all right? You have to have some RGB control. And all of this takes money, which is why photography is not cheap. And when someone tells me that he's a professional but doesn't know how to do all this stuff, I tend to laugh at them. Yeah, you can shoot weddings, that's fine. But you know, if you're working in a commercial environment and you're working with teams, all right, printing teams, production team, broadcast teams, the requirements are quite technical. There are specifics that you have to follow. And if you don't know those specifics, you won't be able to work with them. I had to learn the hard way, ladies and gentlemen, by getting scolded all the time when I was younger. There was no schools, there were no books. You are lucky, you've got schools now, you've got books now, you've got YouTube, you've got the internet. There is no reason for you to not have this knowledge. You're just gonna have to read a lot and do a lot. Last step before we go. If you look on the right-hand side over here, you've got multiple tabs. Each of these tabs would require a separate training just to explain, especially for beginners like yourselves. Don't worry, I'm just going to teach you the two tabs which are most important, which will bump up the quality of your photographs from a 70% success rate to a 95 or 93% success rate. Basically what it means is if you shoot 100 photographs and 70 were good before, now with these techniques, your percentage is going to go up to 90 plus. Okay, of course, don't shoot 100 photographs. All right, just shoot as much as you need and then stop. Change angle, shoot another one. All right, we're going to the third tab. And the third tab has got sliders that help you sharpen an image and reduce noise. And we all know that noise is a big issue, especially if we are using consumer equipment and we are shooting in low light environments. So let's look at noise and let's learn how to remove some noise. What is noise? Okay, let's go into the camera. We're going to zoom in right now. If you look at the bottom left-hand side, you will see a zoom percentage. Right now, it's set at 24.9% or 25%. If I press the Control plus on the keyboard, it is going to zoom in as far as you want to go. Maximum is 400. If you zoom out, it goes to 0.5%. I swear, I don't know why they do that, but yeah. I like to start at 25 so I get the overall view. And then when I want to get into the real nitty-gritty details, I tend to stop at 100%. 100% is what people are going to see. When you deliver your photograph to the printer, when you send it to agencies, when you put it on the website, this is what people are going to see at 100%. They are not going to be able to zoom in, all right? Even if they do zoom in, they will zoom in on a 100% image. This is your quality control. Stay here, okay? Right, so I'm at 100% right now, and if you look at the bottle cap, you will see a lot of dots. Those dots is green, all right? It's not noise yet, it is green. Now we can remove this grain or this noise by going to the third tab and sliding up the luminance noise reduction level. Now here's the secret. Slide it up to the point where it starts to disappear and then stop. Do not go until it totally becomes super smooth like this. This is wrong. You have destroyed the image. You have made the image blur. All right? If I were to look at this and I see this, look at the words. Look at the words vintage black. It's blur. It's totally blur. I can't use this. So start again. Go to the point where the noise just starts to disappear and stay there. All right? Instantly, your image would have a slightly cleaner look. Okay? You can also play with luminance detail, contrast value. You can even remove color portions of the chrominance, the noise reduction. Let me show you. Let me go into a portion that has a lot of color and noise. By the way, guys, you can also defringe and all that. I'll explain that in a while. All right, let's slide the color down. Let's slide the luminance down. All right, let's look at this area over here. I am going to increase the color reduction. All right, now all those little dots of reds and greens, they're gone now. All right, I'm happy with that. I'm also going to increase my noise luminance value. Nice and smooth now. Zooming out. There you go. Much smoother image. All right. Right. Now, this issue of luminance noise and chrominance noise and fringing and artifacting happens when you buy a cheap camera, when you use a cheap camera body and a cheap camera lens. They were not made to produce top-of-the-line stuff. That doesn't mean you cannot produce top-of-the-line stuff. All it means is that you have to do more work in post to remove those problems. Now, if you don't know what those problems are, yeah, you're a rank amateur. But as you get more professional, as you get more experience, you begin to realize that the camera body is irrelevant. You can use a cheap camera body and get good results. The lens, on the other hand, that's the one thing that you cannot run away from. If you can afford it, buy a really good lens and you will get top-of-the-line photographs. You don't need to buy an expensive body. Camera manufacturers want you to buy new bodies every 6 months. So they come up with new models. They tell you it'll make you a better photographer. No, they won't. Read a book. That'll make you a better photographer. All right. Okay, so that's noise reduction. Now, if you look on top here, there's also another slider for sharpening. Now, I really, in all my years, I try my best not to sharpen because it truly screws up an image. But if you do need to sharpen and you want to make something just a little bit crisper, just go in and do about 20% and that's it. All right. If you have to go more at 50% to get something that sharp, it means your shot wasn't in focus. Throw the file away. All right. Like I keep explaining to all of you, raw manipulation. This is called raw manipulation or first primary grading. Only fixes brightness issues, color issues. It cannot fix bad focusing. It cannot fix wrong shutter speeds. All right, those things are gone. When it's gone, it's gone. Now I can fix it if you give me another photograph, I will steal elements from that photograph and paste it in here. But I don't normally do that. I find it's cheaper just to go and reshoot the whole thing again. Okay, so my recommendation is this. Between getting a camera, a body, a flash, get a tripod first. All right, you can use your handphone, you can use any device. Put it on a tripod, shoot, use manual controls. You will get 100% better photographs than anything else. All right, so that's in a nutshell what we covered today. Final recap. Learn to play with the white balance. Learn how to play with the hue. All right, warm, cold, orange, bright, whatever. Learn to fix a bad photograph. The middle portion here is the luminance adjusters. These control the brightness part of the image. Exposure, contrast, highlights, shadows, whites, blacks, okay? Don't worry about what exactly they do. You could get technical and know all these things, but the truth of the matter is to truly understand and remember this, play with it, slide it to the maximum and see how your image improves. If you like this particular look, go for it. It is not wrong, it is not right, it is your choice, all right? The bottom part is for color and chrominance values. You've got clarity, vibrance, and saturation. Again, don't go to the extremes, just increase a little bit, all right? If you increase a little bit and it's still not enough, by all means, go some more. But understand this, the more color you play with, the more artifacts you're going to get. You're going to get more noise. And that is where you have to go to the next section, which is over here, and remove the noise. Simple, okay? Let me ask you a question before we go. Do you think professional photographers with Canon 5D Mark IIs and S1Rs and all that kind of thing, do you think they have the same problems? The answer is yes, they do, but not so bad, okay? They will have noise, but it won't be that intrusive. It won't be that problematic. You know, it'll be quite easy to fix. Their lenses are going to be so expensive. You can literally buy motorbikes and cars with it. You will not get fringing all the time. Sometimes you will get fringing and artifacting. They still need to fix. So today, you have just taken your first step into professional photography, and congratulations, it has nothing to do with a camera. Enjoy. Let's schedule a second meeting if you want to learn something more, if you want to learn secondary grading, if you want to delve deeper into Photoshop. Adjust the time, set the time. I'll find a new platform and we'll meet there again. Thank you and adios. Now to try and stop this video. And